Hello my friends, welcome to my channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads. If you're new here, I'm Lindy. I read a lot, so I'm here to talk to you on this Friday Reads about books. But before I talk about the books I finished reading, 5 of them, I've got a few other things to say, like I finished the shawl that I was knitting. It's actually a little warm for our spring weather. It's 17 degrees here, maybe a little cooler because I'm in the shade in my garden, but I just wanted to show you what it looks like on, and I am going to include some knitting footage at the very end of this video for those of you who are also knitters or just like to hear about knitting. I'm going to take it off now. And now I'm going to talk about cake. Last week I told you I made one of the recipes in here. Well, I made another one from Julie Van Rosendaal's You Are Human and You Need Cake. The one that I made is called Elizabeth and Sandy's Lunar Rhubarb Cake. And there's a nice explanation in the header notes where that recipe comes from. Cake was yummy. I made it for a gathering of friends. A few people came over, former colleagues, and then the very next day we had another social gathering out in the garden with more cake. I didn't make it this time. It was my friend Kevvie who made this beautiful and delicious lemon coconut cake. I think she said the recipe was from New York Times. But just look at it, so gorgeous. And while our friends were here, one of them took this great photo of Lori, my sweetie, and I, each holding one of our furry family members. So I'm going to show that to you here because it's rare that we see the whole family in one photo. You might see either the cat Frida or our dog Joni coming into the video every once in a while. That's just the way things are around here. So what else? It is dandelion season. I enjoy eating pretty much every part of the dandelion. My favorite is the flower buds. So before they're opened, and if you are new to eating dandelions, this is the part that I recommend that you start with because it is so mild. So what I did most recently is I sauteed them gently in olive oil until they were crispy, and then I sprinkled them on top of mixed veggie with soba meal. I think I had some of my homemade kimchi in there as well. Just delicious. It's so good. I also went to a book launch at Audrey's bookstore. This is on Saturday. Now, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we had really poor air quality in Edmonton as a result of forest fires. At that time, I think there were about 90 fires burning out of control around the province. None of them were more than closer than 100 kilometers from Edmonton, but the smoke was definitely here. They do an air quality index with 11 being the highest, the most at risk, and it was at 11 for 3 days straight. So they recommended people stay indoors, and even outdoor recreation facilities were closed in Edmonton. But went to the book launch, was indoors once I got there. I picked up Judy Leblanc's The Broken Heart of Winter, which is a novel about a family who experienced the expulsion of the Acadians in the 1830s in the Maritimes in Canada. Sounds really good. And Wendy McGrath was also reading from her new novel, Broken City. This is the 3rd in the trilogy, and I've read the first 2. They are told from the point of view of a girl child growing up in a poor district in Edmonton. I really enjoyed the first two, so I'm looking forward to the final one. I just realized that we got Broke City and Broken Heart of Winter. Things are broken. And while I was at the bookstore, I spotted a new book by Ali Bryan, Cook. I know she writes humor. I think it's a dysfunctional family and there's a trip to Paris. Sounds good. Alice Major has a new book of poetry, Knife on Snow. So happy to pick up this. This was a total surprise. Nature's Color. So this book by Carol Snyder is about Western Canadian dye plants. I am so interested in natural dyes and the colors that you can get from plants. So I was really excited to find this. And then I've had my name on the waiting list at the library for Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang. And I saw a review by the Poptimist. I'm going to link it down below because I dare you to watch that review and not want to read the book. Anyway, I thought I'll just get my own copy instead of waiting. I think I was position number 189 at the library, so now I've got my own. The problem is with my own books, I always set them aside, or often set them aside, and tend to read library stuff instead, but we shall see. I am looking forward to reading Yellow Face. Now, one more thing before I get to the books that I have finished this week. I learned a life lesson which has to do with toilet cleaner. You probably know this. I did not think about the fact that toilet bowl cleaner has got bleach in it. And I was wearing my favorite trousers when I was cleaning the bathroom, and I got white spots on these trousers. If you were watching my channel back in March, I think I talked about dyeing a damask linen tablecloth and making myself a pair of trousers out of that. I was so happy with them. I've been pretty much wearing them 4 days a week ever since. So I decided to re-dye. So then I had to decide what color I am going to re-dye. Here comes Frida. And I thought about using Cherry bark because I know I can get a gorgeous gold color. This is in my notes. I don't know if you can see that. That's on wool jersey as opposed to linen, but still I'm pretty confident that I can get a really beautiful gold. And the problem is this has already been used once, and it's more work to dye with bark. Needs a certain amount of soaking and straining. So possibility, but I wanted to look at what else I had. I had originally used marigold, and I don't have enough marigold left to dye such a large project, but I could combine this with another color, so that's also a possibility. I mean, another dye material, so that's also a possibility. In my dye cupboard, I also have weld chips. This makes quite a bright yellow. So that's on linen, very bright yellow, which can be toned down There's it toned down with iron. The green, this lighter green, or medium green, I guess it's called, I dipped it in indigo. So yellow plus indigo made this green, but yellow plus iron made that middle color. I have another yellow buckthorn, and again it makes quite a bright yellow. This is ground up dried berries of the buckthorn. The other thing about buckthorn is that it is not entirely light fast, so that's a good reason not to use this one. I have this myrobalan extract, and it's really strong. It can be used just as the tannin treatment, but it makes quite a dark gold. So another strong possibility, and I do have lots of it. It came with an online course. It was part of the equipment, the supplies, and I've still got lots left. Then I thought more about Himalayan rhubarb. So this is the ground root. I know that I've got a dark gold or golden brown from Himalayan rhubarb. Let me show you in my dye journals. So this first one here is Himalayan rhubarb. All three of these are on wool jersey, but I remember I did test on linen as well. This second one has got an iron afterbath, and the last one is dipped in indigo to get this darker brown. Because my trousers originally were in marigold and then the iron afterbath, I'm expecting something along these lines from my dye pot. So we shall see. We shall see. Oh, that is gorgeous. Oh, very happy with that. Very nice. Yeah, I think that's done. And the color is gorgeous. And the bleach spots are very, very barely noticeable. You really have to look hard to find them. So I just need to put the elastic back in the waistband and I'll be wearing them again. Okay, on with the books that I finished this week, starting with an audiobook, The Mini Forest Revolution. Using the Miyawaki method to rapidly rewild the world. It's by Hannah Lewis, who is she's an American who currently lives in France, in Brittany. The audiobook is read by Tia Ryder. I hadn't heard anything about this book. I just saw it in Libby as a new acquisition. It's about trees. I like books about trees, so I checked it out. And I think it's great. I had never heard of Akira Miyawaki, who is a Japanese botanist who came up with the special way of regenerating forests by selecting only species that are native and by planting things really close together. And after the first 2 or 3 years, these plantations don't need any care whatsoever, and They can be small or big, and in this book the author talks about the success of this method around the globe. And there's a clear distinction made between the kind of planting that is done for forest industry reforestation. She says, if you plant wheat, you get a wheat field, not a meadow. If you plant pine trees, you get a timber field, not a forest. And the many benefits that there are by maintaining and actually increasing the number of forested areas on our planet is clearly outlined. So these forests, especially in the mini version, they're not just symbolic, they're also a practical solution to climate change. In the introduction to this audiobook, I had some reservations. The foreword is written by Paul Hawken, and he writes, "It is rare that a book describing a climate change solution flows like honey and reads like silk." And that seems a bit over the top to me. I thought, uh-oh, this book might not be for me. I'm really glad that I gave it a chance, because I found it really encouraging, heartening, and I'd never heard of this method before. It's all really inspiring. Towards the end of the book, Hannah Lewis has become convinced that this is such a great thing that she wants to have a mini forest project in her town in Brittany, and she does document the challenges of convincing people that it's a good idea, and also that she's so excited about it that she wants to jump right in. But there is a lot of planning involved. For example, just to get the nursery stock. These plants have to be grown first in order to plant them, and native species are generally specialty items, or sometimes you have to grow them yourself from seed rather than have them being available commercially. So, all in all, a really great listen. And speaking of forests, here is a picture book about an acorn. Acorn was a Little Wild by Jen Arena, and the illustrations are by Jessica Gibson. It's digital art. The story is about a little acorn who wants to go on an adventure. The tree says, "Don't do that, squirrels will get you." "I don't care, I just want to roll." And there he goes, feeling the wind in his cap. But, squirrel does get him, and he ends up getting dropped. Going on another wild adventure. And the rush of falling from the tree. It was even better than when Acorn had jumped that first time from the oak. Acorn hit the ground and rolled down the hill again. Look, no hands. And another squirrel picks him up. But this time he gets planted in the ground and undergoes quite a transformation. There's the worms, they're so chill. Until there he is, growing. I love this Four Seasons look, being an oak tree, but he hasn't lost his wild side. So it's not only the life cycle of a tree, but also a story about being yourself and kind of reclaiming the word wild, that it is okay to be rambunctious and to just love the thrill of life. And I'm going to have a little oak interlude here, because I've got several oak trees in my garden and little acorns grow where I didn't plant them. This oak tree is right outside our back door, planted by a squirrel in the wrong place. There are overhead wires, but we've just protected them with some electrical tape. So the oak trees in my garden have all been planted by other creatures. Here are a couple of little seedlings that can't stay where they are, but I let them grow for a bit, and this is what I get. Oak galls that are formed on the branches, and I'm going to collect these and use them for my dyeing. You can see now that I've taken the galls off. It doesn't actually damage the tree, it's purely cosmetic, and it would be fine to leave them on. The insect that caused them, it's probably a oak gall wasp. And you can see the little holes where it climbed out. So insect is no longer in there. Okay, so this is what I got. It weighs about 6 grams. So that would be enough to treat maybe 4 cotton bandanas. The pre-treatment before I dye it. And it's not like I'm going to be saving a bunch of money by collecting my own. I buy ground gallnut from Miyawaki in Vancouver, and there it is, $27 for 225 grams. So, well, okay, I've got, I don't know, less than 75 cents worth here, and it still needs to be crushed up a bit with mortar and pestle, but still, it's kind of fun to use my own. Next up is another picture book, My Rainbow. This one is written by a mother-daughter duo, DeShanna Neal and Trinity Neal, and the art is by Twink, who's non-binary and uses they, them. That's all the information I have about the artist. The art is nice and bright. The Neals base this on their own family experience. Trinity is a transgender girl, and she's also autistic, and she told her mother she can't be a girl because she needs long hair. And her mother said, well, I have short hair. Trinity says, I don't think you understand, Mom. I'm a transgender girl. People don't care if cisgender girls like you have short hair, but it's different for transgender girls. I need long hair. Mom thought for a long moment. You're right. It's different for me. And she has an older brother, Lucien, who has an idea. So growing out Trinity's hair isn't the best option because of her autism and how she doesn't like the feel of the itchiness of growing out her hair. She doesn't like hair that touches her neck. But they go to a wig shop and they don't find anything quite suitable. But there's an idea to make her a wig. And look here, even the clerk there has got a they, them name tag. I love that detail. Mother watches YouTube videos and puts together a wig. And there's Trinity wearing it. She says, "It's me, Mum. My hair has finally come. It's my rainbow." And that's the book, My Rainbow. Very joyful and affirming book about a transgender girl. And next up, I have a transgender adult novel, Any Other City, by Hazel Jane Plante, who is a Canadian librarian who lives in Vancouver. This is her second book. It's written in 2 parts, one set in 1993 and one set in 2019. And it's a fictional memoir about a transgender woman who becomes a punk rock star. And in the first section, Tracy has not figured out yet that she is transgender. In the second part, it's after her transition. Both parts are written in second person address. It's like she's writing a long letter to an ex of hers. And I like that format quite well. It's very different. I recently watched online a conversation between Hazel Jane Plante, Casey Plett, and the moderator Candy Tanaka. And in that interview, Plante said that she wants to write into existence the kind of world that she wants to see. And I could tell she was doing that in this novel, especially the second part, where there are so many transgender businesses and places where transgender women could go and just hang out and be with each other and have a lot of sex with each other. There is so much sex in here. It's very sex positive, but for me personally as a reader who does not like to read about sex, it was too much, but I can just skim through those parts, and I think many readers will appreciate all of the hot sexiness. I did appreciate the metafictional aspects in here. So, for example, in that online author event, Plante has her head shaved, and you can see in her author photo as well. And in the book, there's a point where she tells her friend that she shaved her head and thinks that she looks pretty badass with her shorn skull blood red lipstick and silver skull earrings. Now, in this 2019 section, there's a lot of use of emojis in the text messages back and forth. I like it. I like that the publisher avoided putting the actual emojis in, and instead they're described. "When are you coming back?" She added an emoji of a chick hatching from an egg. I sent back a shrug emoji. "Any leads on Algie and Eloise?" She sent me a gif of a panda shaking its head. So, that kind of thing. There's also a passage where she feels sorry for a librarian who's trying to write a novel. "It would be like being a librarian who's trying to write a novel. How could you feel like you had something to say if you were always aware of how many books have already been published? I mean, what kind of narcissist would be able to sit down and write a novel thinking, oh yes, millions of other novels have been published, but wait until you read the humdinger I'm going to write. I feel sorry for any person who feels that way." There's another place where she talks about the French space program, which sent a cat into space. Félicette was the cat's name, who arrived back on Earth safely. And this reminds me of another Canadian transgender creator, Kai Cheng Tom, who wrote a children's picture book about Laika, a Soviet dog who went into space. And here's another example of her writing style. In this case, she is sitting in a laundromat. The end of your letter made me happier and sadder than I can say. I'm sitting in this ratty chair, letting good and bad emotions wash over me as I listen to the whoosh tink, whoosh tink, whoosh tink of the dryer. My heart feels like it's on a tumble cycle. This is also a book that you could read for Mental Health May. A traumatic experience caused her to break up with a long-time lover, and that's what's going on in the second part of this book. And she's dealing with the mental health fallout from that. But overall, this book is about finding yourself and finding your own creativity. Tracy starts out in this other city, which is never named, by the way. I think it's probably a composite European city, but I got the sense that it was maybe in the north of Portugal or maybe in Spain. She goes there because she knows an artist, a transgender artist that she's really interested in her work, teaches there. And Tracy has been rejected from art school, and she wants to pursue her art. In the second part of this book, she goes back to that city, and she's 46 by this point, and still having a lot of sex. And and so by this time she's talking about music a lot, because she's discovered that in the interim she's become famous, and the songs and songwriting portions of this book really felt true to me. I loved the songs. I could almost hear them. And that's another thing about Hazel Jane Plante, who is also a musician. So there is a lot that works really well in any other city. I almost forgot. This was to be the Trans Girl April group read. Kevvie of Say Kevvie had chosen this one, and that I didn't pick up this copy until the very last day of April, so I'm just getting to it now. And I hope there's lots of other readers out there who have read it. Please let me know in the comments if you have, and maybe we can do some discussing there. Yeah, good stuff. Last up is my favorite book of the bunch that I've told you about today. It's an audiobook, My Last Time We Drowned. Seeking refuge on the world's deadliest migration route, and it is by the Irish journalist Sally Hayden. The audiobook is read by Aoife McMahon. I was recommended to read this by one of my subscribers, Jacqueline McMenamin, way back in January when I talked about No Friend But the Mountains. And this recommendation was right on, Jacqueline. What a fantastic, devastating book. It is about a humanitarian crisis that is still going on. The author was contacted via social media in 2018 by a refugee who was being held in a detention center in Libya after having to attempted to get to Europe. And subsequently, many other refugees also got in touch with her. In the audiobook edition, at the very beginning, in the introduction, there are bits of the actual sound that the phone calls that Sally had with people. Like you can hear when there's bombing going on during the war in Libya, for example. And then there's more at the end as well. So she talks about, number one, how dangerous this Mediterranean crossing is. She says in 2018, an average of 6 people per day died trying to cross, which makes it the world's deadliest sea crossing. And between 2014 and 2019, more than 19,000 men, women, and children drowned in the Mediterranean. So, what is preventing all these people from getting to safety? The European Union. So, in Libya, the refugees and economic migrants who make it that far are subject to so many crimes against humanity, including human trafficking, where people are sold as slaves and sex workers, people are held for ransom, people are raped, tortured, executed, deported, held in prisons where they have no access to light, they're starved. Some of these detention centers in Libya have more than 90% of the inmates have got tuberculosis. Starvation makes them much more susceptible to die of all kinds of diseases. There's little access to drinking water, never mind water for cleaning. Refugees talk about how the guards are sadistic and do things like put their bread rolls on the ground and then pee on them all and then smirk when the detainees scramble to eat them anyway because they're starving. So the international law of non-refoulement prohibits sending a person back to a country where their life is in danger or where they're at risk of being tortured or persecuted. And in 2012, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that refugees could not be returned to Libya by European boats because there was a huge risk to their lives there. So the EU found a way around that by equipping, training, and supporting Libya's Coast Guard in order to patrol the sea themselves and stop people from leaving Libya. International aid organizations and individuals can be charged with human trafficking if they try and save people who are in these rubber dinghies in the Mediterranean. And the corruption that is in the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, who is supposed to be looking after refugees, including in Libya, the corruption is so high. There was an external audit that was carried out by a UN oversight group, and it found the UNHCR's work in Libya to be unsatisfactory. In the first 6 months of a year, UNHCR employees who they were supposed to be registering a planned 18,000 refugees, and they managed to register 6, none of whom had been issued any identity cards. Of course, another problem is that wealthy countries simply aren't making enough spaces open for refugees to come to their countries. And she writes that between late 2017 and 2020, so just before the COVID-19 pandemic started, only 5,700 refugees were legally evacuated from Libya. Yeah, the other thing about these detention centers in Libya is the people are housed by the hundreds in spaces that are built around weapons, munition stores. And so they're using the refugees as human shields to protect their ammunitions. The whole situation is just so unjust. And I hope that with more awareness there, that organizations and governments are going to be held more accountable. We shall see. Thank you so much for watching. If you have comments on any of these books that I've talked about, or my other projects, cooking, textiles, and so on, please say hello or say what you've got to say in the comments down below. I always love to hear from you, and stick around for a bit of knitting footage if that interests you. Bye for now.
The section that I'm working on now on this striped organza shawl, it has got a slip stitch pattern, and it is created with these two colors. With the white, I'm knitting in stockinette. With the gray, I'm knitting in reverse stockinette. So first, I will start at this end and knit, and then slide the stitches back and knit with the gray. Every other row I am reducing by 1 stitch, so gradually I'm getting this triangle shape. And then the slip stitch pattern, these stripes, are created by slipping that stitch when I'm knitting with the gray instead of knitting it. And I'm maintaining a I-cord edge, which the whole shawl has all the way through. And I love the way that this complements the brioche section over here. It's a well thought out pattern designed by Judy in Paris. And yeah, I'm having a really good time knitting it. there's the final point on the shawl. I might put a tassel on the end there. We'll see. So I've picked up stitches along this edge, including 3 that are slipped to keep the I-cord edge, and I'm ready to start knitting the final section.